Hey, is that the MacBook Air M1? Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? It's got 16 gigs of RAM, a terabyte of storage.
Hey everyone, look at this guy. He's still using a 5-year-old MacBook. What a fossil.
What's wrong with using a 5-year-old MacBook?
Well, it's old, so it has to be dog water, right?
Actually, no, it runs pretty well actually. Here, look, I'm editing a video on it and it's actually running a bunch of Chrome tabs in the background as well.
But,
Look, it even runs Cyberpunk 2077. Although you do need 16 gigs of RAM to run it, and it looks like it's running off of a Nintendo Switch. But it's playable.
is there anything you don't like about your computer?
Well, the keyboard wore down quite a bit and the battery life isn't as good as it used to be, but I can replace both of those for a fraction of the cost of a new computer and get a couple more years out of it.
Wow, is there anything your MacBook can't do?
I don't know how to end this skit. Another year, another M1 MacBook Air review. It's becoming a channel tradition at this point. This is like the 4th time I'm reviewing this thing. But let's get started. So tech YouTube is buzzing right now about the M5, M6 MacBook Pros, but I'm gonna be honest, I'm just some guy who has a weird obsession with technology. I don't have $3 to drop on a new MacBook Pro. In fact, I'm still using the first ever Apple Silicon MacBook, the M1 MacBook Air. I don't know why I introduced a laptop. You guys already know what I'm talking about. You clicked on this video. But yeah, this is a 5-year-old laptop that can be found for quite cheap nowadays in 2026. And if you're considering buying one of these laptops, or if you already own one and you're just trying to figure out where it stands in the laptop landscape in 2026, then this video is for you. Let's get started. So first off, build quality and design. When this laptop came out, it was considered a premium laptop. And even 5 years later, it still feels great. It's got an aluminum chassis, so it's nice and sturdy. I low-key haven't really been babying this machine at all. I just chuck it into my backpack. And it does have a fair bit of wear and tear, like scratches from over here from when I dropped a mug on it. But other than that, there's nothing out of the ordinary. This laptop has held up quite well over the 3.5 years that I've owned it. The bottom here does look funny. There are quite a few scratches and also this little white spot because I have an aluminum laptop stand, which my iPad is currently sitting on. And this has just rubbed on that for quite a bit. So it looks like that, but I'm not looking at the bottom of the laptop anyways. I don't really care what it looks like, but here's the top of the laptop. What was that crunch? Here's the top of the laptop and it's overall held up quite well. This is the space gray color. I've actually dropped this laptop a few times, just having it fall from my lap and stuff, and it handled those perfectly fine. The aluminum on the palm rests has worn down a bit because of my palms resting on them for 3.5 years. You can kind of see the paint starting to wear off and it does feel a little weird there, but I just wipe it with a bit of isopropyl alcohol and it feels like it's back to normal. There's also a chip near the trackpad from when I spilled some chemicals on it during a chem lab, but it's just cosmetic. It doesn't affect the use of the laptop. As for design, I haven't daily driven any of the newer Macs with the boxier design and the notch, but I'm just a really big fan of the timeless tapered edge look of the MacBook Air. This is the design they've been using since the original MacBook Air, and it is kind of sad to see them get rid of the taper in the new MacBook Airs, although the new MacBook Airs also look really nice. The bezels are kind of thick in this day and age, but I don't really care about the bezels that much. Would it be nice to have thinner bezels? Yes, but I'm not going to buy a new MacBook just because I want thinner bezels. By the way, my MacBook did ship with a dead pixel on the screen, and that is a manufacturing defect. I could have taken it back to Apple if I wanted to, but I literally don't notice it in day-to-day use. If you do get a dead pixel on your MacBook, that's totally a valid reason for you to return it. But for me, I was like, it's not worth the hassle. But yeah, overall, the build quality for the M1 MacBook Air is still really good. Still has a nice, solid aluminum frame. Got some chips and scratches on the edge, but that's just regular wear and tear. You'd expect that with any sort of electronic device. And even the new MacBooks today still use this sort of aluminum chassis. Now, as for the keyboard is really excellent. It's on par with even the new MacBook keyboards that are available today. It's a really comfortable keyboard to type on. I've written essays, lab reports, scripts on this thing for the past 3.5 years. It's very excellent. This is right after Apple's butterfly keyboard fiasco. You might have heard of it, where it was just a super unreliable keyboard. This is when Apple switched to a scissor switch magic keyboard type of mechanism, and it feels great. I haven't really had any issues with it. Like, I've eaten around the keyboard, which you shouldn't do. You're gonna get crumbs in the keyboard. But even with that kind of use, the keyboard never really gave me any long-term issues. You're getting some pretty decent key travel for a laptop this thin. It's got very little deck flex, and it's also backlit for nighttime typing because you waited till 11 p.m. to do an assignment that's due that night. I'm not speaking from experience or anything.
Final countdown for the EE 551. Hallie.
Now, these keyboards don't hold up that well though in terms of cosmetic appearance. even with today's MacBooks, I see people complaining about the keys getting this sort of shine after even a few weeks of using their MacBooks. I've used mine for 3.5 years, and this is what they look like. And it doesn't really affect functionality, but for me, I just hated how it felt. This is honestly one of my biggest pain points with this thing because the keyboard is the part of the laptop that I touched the most. Some people might not care, but I did. So I got a new MacBook keyboard. And yeah, after a few hours, I was able to pop off the keycaps on my MacBook and swap them with the new keycaps I bought on Amazon for about 30 Canadian dollars before tax and shipping. Now, they did forget to ship me my function keys, so I wasn't able to switch out those. And the shift key they shipped me didn't really fit on my MacBook keyboard. But the actual keycaps themselves, the ones I were able to install, they feel amazing. I can't tell a difference between the keycaps I bought on Amazon and the ones that came with the laptop. This is not sponsored or anything. I bought the keycaps with my own money, but just changing the keycaps made my laptop feel so much newer. I will link the ones I used down below in the comments and the description as an affiliate link if you want to check them out. This isn't the hardest repair ever, but it definitely does take a bit of effort to remove each individual keycap and try not to break the little clips on the inside of the keycap, as well as on the actual MacBook chassis. So definitely know what you're doing before you start this repair. I watched this tutorial video right here, very helpful, explained things very thoroughly. But again, swapping out the keycaps doesn't get rid of the core issue of the keycaps getting that shine. I know that eventually the new keycaps I installed will start to feel like my old keycaps with that grimy shine, but for now, they feel great. And if you're curious, here's what the keyboard sounds like. But yeah, the keyboard is excellent, great key travel, just overall feels great to type on. Just keep in mind that if you're buying used, be careful about the shiny keyboard problem if that matters to you, if you care about how your keyboard looks and feels. You know the other thing that you touch a lot on your computer? The trackpad. And the trackpad on the M1 MacBook Air is still super excellent. Again, it's on par with modern MacBook trackpads. Like the newer MacBooks, it uses a Force Touch trackpad, which is basically like a trackpad that doesn't actually move all that much. You're not actually clicking a trackpad. Instead, when you click the trackpad feels the pressure from your finger and it vibrates a little haptic motor. And because it uses a haptic motor, you can actually customize the feel of the trackpad click in your settings. So you can change if you want a light, medium, or firm click. And because it's pressure sensitive, you also have a feature called Force Touch. So if you press down super hard on something, it'll do a sort of secondary action. So for me, the most useful application of this feature is lookup. So if I'm on the web or something and I see something, I'm like, oh, I don't know what that word means. I can quote unquote force click on the trackpad, which is clicking, and then when I press harder, it clicks again, and that will look the word up for me. And yeah, macOS is very gesture heavy, right? Lots of multi-finger gestures to do things in the operating system, and this trackpad still feels great for that. Nice big glass trackpad. It has worn down a bit over the years, you can see that shine, but again, this is just normal wear and tear. Any older laptop will look like that. When I first got my Mac, one side of the trackpad did feel like it was more sunken in than on the other side. I have found other cases of this on like Reddit and stuff, but this doesn't seem to be a widespread issue, rather just a small manufacturing issue. It doesn't bother me, but if that bothers you, then if you're buying a used Mac and you have the opportunity to check out the computer in person, then that's something you should probably check for. But yeah, overall the trackpad is still great, still on par with modern MacBooks, and I don't really have any complaints about it. Now let's talk about the port selection. It wasn't great then, and it certainly isn't great now. With the M1 MacBook Air, you're getting 2 Type-C ports and a headphone jack. That's it, nothing else. So if you're gonna be plugging anything other than Type-C accessories and a headphone jack, you should get a dongle. I'm pointing here because this is where my dongle is, but you probably can't see it because it's blocked by the iPad. But yeah, I've honestly just gotten used to plugging things in with a dongle on my MacBook. Like most of the times when I'm out and about, I don't need to plug anything in. And when I'm home, I can just plug it into the dongle anyways, which will connect me to my monitor, and it works just fine like that. I've honestly gotten used to the dongle life. However, dongles are inconvenient. You have to carry them and sometimes they don't work, and I've broken like 1 or 2 dongles myself just because of how much I've used them. And there have been times when I'm out and about and I realize I don't have my dongle and I need to plug something in, and it's just super annoying. The newer Macs somewhat remedy this. The new MacBook Pros have pretty much any port you'd want in a modern day computer. HDMI, what else is on there? There's HDMI, there's SD card slot, pretty much any port you'd want from a modern day computer, except maybe USB-A, but I'm gonna be honest, who likes USB-A in this day and age? The modern day MacBook Airs honestly don't have a much better port selection. They just add a MagSafe port for charging, but at least having an extra port for charging frees up the two USB-C ports on the side, because on this MacBook, if I'm using one of the USB-C ports for charging, then I only really have one USB-C port left over for anything like data transfers and whatnot. It's kind of inconvenient. But the new MacBooks have MagSafe and two Type-C ports, so you don't have to worry about having one of those Type-C ports being taken up by charging. But what is MagSafe, you might be asking? Well, if you've been watching the channel for a while, then you know exactly what's coming next. So yeah, MagSafe is definitely worth having in my opinion. It's a potentially laptop saving feature. This MacBook unfortunately doesn't have it, but the newer Macs do. And I should mention that even though the new MacBooks have a MagSafe port, they're also able to be charged through USB-C. So you're really getting the best of both worlds. You're getting the safety of MagSafe for like when you're at home or something. And then if you're on the go and you don't have a MagSafe charger, then you can still charge using Type-C. So yeah, best of both worlds. This thing doesn't have it, very unfortunate. Also something worth mentioning, on my space gray color, you do see quite a bit of scratching around the USB-C ports. And if you're buying used, then definitely check the ports for corrosion or any signs of like really bad wear and tear. Plug some stuff in, make sure it works, because otherwise the ports might be kind of iffy. So yeah, the port selection on this laptop is not great, but USB-C is versatile enough that I can keep living with it, I guess. Now, as for the display still holds up quite well in 2026. Again, it's quite comparable to even modern MacBooks. It's got a resolution of around 2560 to 1600, which basically means it's sharp enough that you won't be able to tell individual pixels at a normal viewing distance. The viewing angles are great, the colors pop really well, you're getting some really great contrast, and it just overall looks really nice to look at. I don't know, I'm not a screen type of guy, I don't know the specs of this screen off the top of my head, but from my perspective, as an average person, this screen is great. It's great for typing documents, watching videos. I should mention that the refresh rate is only 60 Hz. If you have a modern iPhone, right, any iPhone Pro from the 13 or higher, or an iPhone 17, then you know what 120 Hz is because your phone has it. And all the new MacBook Pros from 2021 and beyond, with the exception of the 13-inch 2022 MacBook Pro, also have 120 Hz. This MacBook Air has 60 Hz, and even the most modern M4 MacBook Air is also still capped at 60 Hz. For me, is that a deal breaker? Not really. Having 120 Hz is nice. It does make your screen feel smoother and snappier, but I think it's more important to have that on a phone than on a MacBook, because on a phone you're swiping, you're scrolling, lots of animations and movements, whereas on a computer a lot of the times you're just staring at a static document screen, maybe a spreadsheet or a document, or you're just watching a video that's playing at 30 FPS anyways. But yeah, if you really care about refresh rate, then just know that this is stuck at 60 Hz. My only real complaints about this screen would be the brightness and maybe the bezels. The brightness is capped at about 400 nits, whereas the new MacBook Airs are at 500 nits, and the new MacBook Pros can hit about 1000 nits outdoors and 1600 nits at peak brightness for when you're watching HDR content and stuff. You can really see the difference if you go to an Apple store. Now for indoor use, the M1 MacBook Air's 400 nits is fine, but if I'm using it outdoors, not that the weather is great for that at the moment, but when I'm outdoors, especially if the sun is shining, it can be really hard to see the screen. And as for the bezels, I don't really care too much, but some people might not like them. They do look quite dated when you put them next to the new Macs with the slim bezels. Over the years, the screen has collected its fair share of scratches, and you can also start to see the keyboard's indent, but again, that's just regular wear and tear. If you care a lot about that, or if you care a lot about your screen looking pristine, then that's definitely something you want to check for when you're looking at used versions of this MacBook. But yeah, overall, solid display. Quality-wise, it's still great. Resolution is still great. Just be careful about excessive wear on the screen if you're buying used machines. The speakers on this laptop are solid, especially for something of this tiny size. They're front-firing and they sound nice and loud at full volume. Sometimes they do crackle just a tiny bit when I have them at like full volume. There's a bit of distortion, but it's not something that I come across often. They're very, very solid speakers for this caliber of laptop. Here's a sound test. Fun fact, the microphone is actually hidden in the speaker grill of the laptop. Here's how it sounds. The microphone is pretty good. It's good enough for Zoom calls and even like recording little webcam videos like this, for doing like voice memos and stuff. I don't really have any complaints about the mic. One thing that leaves a little more to be desired though is the webcam. The webcam wasn't great back in 2020 and it's certainly not great now. I think it's probably the part of the Mac that's aged the worst. It still looks fine and it's still usable. Like, it's good for Zoom calls and your occasional FaceTime. It's just the new Macs have made quite a few improvements in the webcam space. So yeah, microphone and speakers are great. Camera, not so much, but you can use your iPhone as your Mac webcam through continuity camera. As for battery life, it was really good when I got it. It would last about a day or two without charging. Now I do need to charge it more often. The battery health is at 82% and I'm considering changing it. It's been at 82 for like years and it just recently dropped to 81, like just as I was checking it. Battery health is definitely something you want to consider if you're getting used. If it's below 80%, I would probably steer clear from that computer, or if I did buy a MacBook with under 80% battery health, I would get it replaced through Apple, especially if I plan on using it for a long time. But I can definitely still get about 4 or 5 hours of light to medium use from this thing with the current battery health at 82%, which is still better than my pretty much new Windows laptop gaming PC. Although, to be fair, that's a whole different category of computers. And now let's talk about performance. Performance on this MacBook Air has honestly aged like fine wine. My MacBook has the 8-core CPU and 7-core GPU, so the base model M1, this is quite literally the worst version of Apple Silicon out there, and it also has 16 gigs of RAM. Let's talk about RAM first before we talk about anything else. RAM, in my opinion, is super important to the user experience. So this MacBook Air has 2 different configurations for RAM. You can get it in 8 gigs or you can get it in 16 gigs. Nowadays, modern MacBooks have 16 gigs of RAM starting. 8 gigabytes of RAM is not even an option. In my opinion, 8 gigabytes of RAM is fine if you're doing basic tasks like web browsing, but if you're doing anything else like video editing, or if you plan on having a lot of Chrome tabs open or just planning to do a lot of multitasking, then I think 16 gigs is better, especially as through the years, the software updates get more and more demanding. If you're planning on buying an M1 MacBook Air now, then definitely go for a 16 gig option if you can. If you're choosing RAM and storage, choose for the future since you can't upgrade the components once you buy the machine. RAM situation aside though, performance is great. Even though this is the worst, least powerful version of the M1 chip, it runs awesome with the 16 gigs of RAM. There were times when I thought this thing was getting slower, but no, it was just because my workload was getting heavier. I was literally running Chrome with about 60 tabs open, and I would pretty much never dip below 30 tabs, and this was constant. Every time I used my computer, Chrome would be open in the background with all of those tabs just draining my RAM. And on top of Chrome, I'd regularly have Final Cut Pro open, Spotify, Apple Notes, reminders, all open in the background regularly, and it was still usable like that. I used my laptop in that state quite a bit, and after doing that for a while, it did feel a bit sluggish, and then I realized that realistically speaking, there was no point in leaving all of those tabs open just in case I needed them. So now I try to keep as little tabs open as possible, like 9 or so tabs, because honestly, that's all the tabs I need. Editor me here, I yet again have like 25 tabs open and also all of these apps open as well. I got Chrome, Final Cut, just all of this stuff open, and I'm editing the video you are watching right now, and it's still running very smoothly, very snappily, but looks like old habits die hard. If I wanted to have 60 or 70 tabs open on this computer, could I handle it? Absolutely. It's just the less tabs I have on this MacBook, the more snappy it feels. Maybe it's placebo, but also it's just better for my own sanity to have less tabs open. It feels less overwhelming. And the only task I do where I feel like I'm actually pushing the M1 to its limits still is when I'm editing big projects in Final Cut Pro. But I understand that most people buying a MacBook Air aren't looking to edit videos. They only want it for stuff like school, web browsing, YouTube, FaceTime calls. And this thing still handles all of those tasks really, really well. I know I said just now that most people aren't buying it for video editing, but you can absolutely edit videos on this MacBook. I've been editing all of the videos on this channel on this MacBook Air M1 since I got it in 2022. And this video that you're watching right now, this review of the M1 MacBook Air, is going to be edited on the M1 MacBook Air. This is my main computer and I use this MacBook Air to run this entire YouTube channel. Even things like gaming. right? Like this MacBook is not a gaming laptop by any means, but it runs Minecraft and it is playable. It's obviously not going to be as good of an experience as if you bought a device that was actually meant for gaming, right? But it's playable. Even games like Cyberpunk 2077, you can install Steam on this Mac and you can load up Cyberpunk 2077 on this MacBook. Granted, this is only available on the 16 gig of RAM configuration of the MacBook Air M1, but it honestly runs fine. Like the graphics aren't the best and the frame rate is not great. I think it's about 30 frames per second that I can get on this Mac. But yeah, Cyberpunk is very much playable on this 6-year-old thin and light fanless MacBook Air. Side note, Cyberpunk, the game is really good. I started playing because of Cyberpunk Edgerunners, the anime, and that anime is really good as well. And lots of people say it was sad. Not me though. I think it was fine. But yeah, if you're old enough, definitely check it out. But back to the MacBook. Overall, performance is very excellent. It should be the least of your worries. The M1 chip was honestly so ahead of its time. And even 5 years after it came out, I feel like it's still enough for my needs. So, the laptop landscape in 2026. Should you upgrade? If you're watching this video and you already own an M1, you're either curious about where your M1 MacBook stands in 2026, or you're unsatisfied with your laptop and you want to see if it's worth upgrading. Now, I can say what I think about my laptop, and I think it's enough for my needs, but you ultimately have to choose that for yourself. So take a look at your laptop, ask what you're unhappy with. If it's trivial stuff like, oh, the bezels look too thick for 2026, or the battery life is worse, then ask yourself if it's really worth upgrading to a new MacBook for thousands of dollars when your current MacBook still meets most of your needs. If you have a lot of those little annoyances adding up, then it might be worth upgrading, especially if you have the funds. But the M1 MacBook Air is still very capable. You can still definitely get a few more years out of it. Apple will still support it with new macOS updates probably until at least 2027. And for me, I took a look at my laptop and I asked myself what I was unhappy with. That was mostly the keyboard feel and the battery life. And the keyboard, I was able to replace the keycaps, so that fixed my issue. And then the battery life, right now, I'm just using it plugged in most of the time anyways at my desk. And if I really don't like the battery in this laptop anymore, then I have the option to go to Apple and replace the battery for around 200 Canadian dollars, which is still a fraction of the cost of a new computer. Now, what if you're debating whether or not you want to buy an M1 MacBook Air in the first place? I think any older Mac, not even just the M1, is a good value budget laptop. Like even an M2 or an M3 MacBook Air. Don't go lower than M1 though, because before M1, there was Intel, and any Intel Mac is at least 6 years old and is getting support drop next year. Apple's not gonna keep updating it. macOS Tahoe is the last update for Intel MacBooks. And all the good things you hear about Mac, the good battery life, the good thermals, and the super good performance, don't really apply to Intel. So if you're getting a used Mac in 2026, M1 is absolutely the lowest you should go. The thing is, there are rumors about a budget MacBook. So if you can wait for that to come out and see if that's gonna be a good fit for your use case. And I would honestly recommend stretching your budget just a little bit and seeing if you can pick up something like an M2 MacBook Air, because the M2 MacBook Air is 2 years newer and you're getting that new redesign. Now, here are some tips for getting a used Mac from a private seller. If you're getting it from a refurbished store, you probably don't have to worry about any of these, but if you're getting something from somewhere like Facebook Marketplace, then here are a few things to keep in mind. So you wanna check things like the battery health in the settings. Again, a MacBook battery that's below 80% battery health will be significantly degraded, and you probably want to avoid that. You also want to check the ports and make sure they both work, see if there's corrosion or anything, and also you want to check for MDM, mobile device management. Some Macs that are sold on the used marketplace were owned by businesses or schools, and they have mobile device management software installed on them. Now, these are either stolen from the business or the business is clearing inventory and they forgot to get rid of MDM. You can Google how to easily check for MDM, but if the listing says MDM or if you know it has MDM, it's best to avoid that listing since it is a hassle to remove. You should also check for iCloud lock. When buying a used Mac, make sure the seller removes their iCloud account, their Apple account from the Mac completely, because there's no way for you to remove it later. If they won't remove it, or if you factory reset it and it asks for someone else's Apple ID while you're setting it up, then chances are it's stolen. Again, this is only something you have to worry about if you're buying it from a private seller on like Facebook Marketplace. If you're buying it from a reputable refurbished store, then it should be fine. Also, another thing you should check out is Apple's own refurbished website. They sell refurbished MacBook Airs, and they sell them for pretty much brand new condition. You still have the option to get Apple Care, and they give you a brand new battery, and all of the experiences I've heard from the Apple refurbished store have been pretty positive, because you're basically getting a brand new Mac straight from Apple, but for way cheaper. But yeah, overall this is still a very solid laptop. It's honestly like a Toyota Corolla, it just keeps running. My only real complaints, again, like I mentioned, were the keyboard and the battery, but those are fixable without getting a whole new laptop. I wanted a new computer, but that was it. I wanted a new computer, but I realized that it wouldn't be worth spending thousands of dollars that I don't have on a new computer that I didn't need. A lot of us M1 users are kind of in that boat right now. We don't need the upgrade, but our computer's old enough that we want the upgrade. And there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that. If you have the funds or you see it as a quality of life improvement, then it might be worth going for it. But know that there's probably nothing wrong with the M1 computer that you already own. Now, if you're considering buying an M1 Air in 2026, know that it is in its twilight years. It probably has a good 2 or 3 years left in the spotlight before it starts fading away slowly. If you can find a good price for it, or your budget can absolutely only accommodate for the M1, then it's still a fine old laptop. But if you can wait for the rumored budget MacBook, then wait. Or save up some more and pick up an M2 MacBook Air. As for me, I'm gonna try to stretch my usage of this Mac for as long as possible. Or I might fold and buy the M6 MacBook Pros in the fall, who knows? But that's it for today's video. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what your Mac situation is like, and if you want to see any other types of content from this channel. Be awesome and stay techie. Bye!
Who are you talking to?
We're getting the M5 MacBook, the M5 Pro MacBook Pros, like the M5 Mac, the M5 Pro MacBook, the M5 MacBook Pro. Now are we still recording? We are still recording. But USB-C is versatile enough that I can live with it. Hashtag dongle life. Guess I gotta keep living the dongle life. But from my perspective as fun fact, the microphone is actually hidden in the speaker grill of the laptop. Here's how it sounds. Yeah, the microphone's there. Anyways,